Hello, Oggies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. Let's do something just a little different today, just for fun. It's Friday. I finally got back in the airplane today, and I'm going to show you a couple loops around the field that we did. If there are parts in there I'm going to skip over, we'll just skip over them. I mean, you can look at a mountain and you're approaching a mountain and it's still the same mountain. You know, you kind of get it. It's going to be pretty short. The camera that I used is the camera that I use for my overhead work here when I'm taking pictures of the whiteboard or something like that. This camera is definitely not the best for what we're doing here, so I'm going to have to look into a GoPro camera where I can get something that's a little sharper or something. But we'll just do this and see if we can't have a little fun doing this together. This is the first time I've been back in the aircraft since January 7th, and then that was only for a half an hour when we discovered that we had a leak in the pitot system. And then while the airplane was sitting in the hangar a couple weeks later, it was the 7th I flew, it was the 8th I broke my ankle, and we discovered that there was just massive fuel leaks and everything in the airplane. Thank God I broke my ankle and didn't have to go up and discover this problem in the air. Anyway, and the last time before that was September 29th. So there's been this big gap in between. And the airplane feels, on the one hand, familiar, and on the other hand, like, what on earth have I got hold of here? So let's take a look. Okay, we're about to pull onto the runway here. This is Delta Blake Field, AJZ. This is runway 21. That's the magnetic heading that we're going from, okay? And I'm sorry, to. So you see the big numbers 1, 2 there. Okay, we're on the runway and we're gonna take off. So I'm sitting in the left-hand seat. My flight instructor, Sue, is sitting in the right-hand seat, and we're going down the runway here. There's quite a bit of crosswind. There's 7-mile-per-hour crosswinds, but it is gusting all over everywhere. And so we take off, and as soon as we do, you see that pushes us off to one side. Now that smoke down there is actually about a mile beyond the end of the runway, and that smoke goes in all different directions as we're taking our flight. You can see over in this area here the airport infrastructure. My hangar's about right there. Very sleepy little airport, nice little place. The runway is about 6,000 feet long. So now we're going to come straight out and we're going to do something called the pattern. And we're going to make a left-hand turn after a little ways here, about a mile beyond the end of the runway. We're going to turn and make a rectangle. And so this next leg will be called the crosswind. And then we'll do a downwind, and then a base, and then the final comes in back into the runway. On this particular trip, we ended up doing a go-around on the first landing because the winds were just shifting all over, and we had a bit of a downdraft, so we just kept going. So this lake right here is Confluence Lake. It's where the Gunnison and the Uncompahgre rivers meet. The town here is Delta, Colorado, and you can see we're looking through the windshield. Now these weird flashing things here is the camera versus the propeller. The two are obviously not getting along at all. Over here you see the Snuffles Range. See that? The mountain in the middle, the tall one, is this is Mount Snuffles. Right here you see that concrete grain elevator right there. That's my big reference in the area. When I can see that, I know where I am immediately. So now we're turning to go on our crosswind leg, and more lakes. There's lakes around here everywhere to hold water. This range here, I'm not sure what it's called. It's a lot closer to Delta. You can see the way the clouds are gathered just over the hills would indicate quite a bit of stuff aloft. That's the runway right there. So when we go around the pattern, we get up about 1,000 feet above the airport, which is where we are right now. So we've climbed out. Technically, at this point, we could go in any direction, but we're going to stay in the pattern and come back around and land. So you see the runway there, that's 6,000 feet. And we just dropped the engine pitch a little bit because we're at cruising altitude now, which is 1,000 feet above. The runway is at about 5,200 feet above sea level, and so we're at about 6,200 feet above sea level. And as we go along through here, we do a few checks and, you know, make sure everything works. This area in here that looks like Badlands is, in fact, Badlands. Nothing grows there. A lot of it's actually given over by the federal government to motorcyclists who can just go ride anywhere in there. Or you do that in your Jeep or whatever. This road right here goes out over towards Cedar Edge, which is out in this area right here. If you were to continue up through here, you would eventually get to McClure Pass, which is beautiful in the fall, and I'll have to fly over it and give you some views of that. Now you can tell that we're starting to slow down a little bit. Over here is the runway. We're slowing down because we want to come down. We've got now 1,000 feet to lose as we come into this. Basically, the pattern means doing a takeoff followed immediately by a landing. You skip everything in between. So you can practice the takeoff, practice the landing, practice the takeoff, practice the landing. In a moment here, we'll start turning to the north. These aren't what you would call real sharp turns because it is so gusty up there. You can tell that it's blowing the airplane around quite a bit. See these hills right here? There are not very many places in here for an emergency landing. And that's the runway right there. Right there. And that's where we're going to go. Now, as it turns out, fighting the winds here, we ended up coming in kind of hot and kind of high. So we decided to just go around and do it all over again. So this area is just nasty land. Although somebody put a golf course in over here, you can see the dried grass from the golf course. Okay, now here's the runway. We want to line up on the runway. So we've got to counter the wind, line up on the runway. Now you see these two lights right here? Those two lights are white, which means we're too high. If we were at the right altitude, there'd be one red, one white. If you're too low, they'd both be red. Now clearly we've already decided we're going to go around, so we just give it full throttle and keep on going. And boy, that wind is just blowing us all over the place. Again, you can see now that this smoke from the farmers burning their fields out here is shifting in a different direction. So we're going to just fly over the runway and then repeat this. It doesn't take very long to do it, actually, to get all the way around. And there's that lake, Confluence Lake again. So you see how the smoke is kind of coming up like this, whereas before it was blowing to one side or the other. When I get another camera, I'm going to get a GoPro and get a mount for it so that I can hook it to one of the wing struts, and it won't have all of this stuff in place. Plus you'll lose the glare that's in the windshield right there. And I'm going to pipe audio out to it. I'm going to put a microphone into my ear cup on the headset and then run that microphone out to the GoPro or out to just to a recorder, so that I can put the actual chatter between the pilot and trainer onto that video. You can see some of the streets in here in Delta. This curve right here is US Highway 50, and that's also one of my landmarks that I look for turning. See that it doesn't seem like a landmark when you're driving on it, but it is certainly from the air. We are on the crosswind, and we will very shortly be turning for the downwind. Now, the downwind means that actually we have the wind behind us. Normally you like to take off and land into the wind, so when you're turning around, there's the airport right there. When you're turning around like this, the wind is actually behind you, pushing you a little faster. You don't like to take off like that because it's hard to get going fast enough to take off. You want to take off into the wind. So this runway right here, whereas in calm winds we'd be using the other end of it and going this way, today, because of the wind, we're landing into it this way. There is actually another runway down here that is dirt, that's used by the guys who like to take off and land in the dirt. Anyway, we're getting down to the end of our downwind, and we're slowing down earlier and losing speed as well, and dipping down. We've got almost 1,000 feet to lose, so we're starting now with one notch of flaps, and as we turn on our base leg, which is where we turn perpendicular to the runway over here, we're going to put in another notch of flaps, and then on the final, which is the last approach straight into the runway, we'll put in a third notch of flaps. So we'll be using all the flaps and slowing down quite a bit. Now, because of the wind and how weird it was, there was an updraft or downdraft or something right here toward the end of the runway, that we still are a little high, but we only need 300 or 400 feet to land in this aircraft, and the runway is 6,000 feet long, so we just decided to kind of let it, we're going to come in lower and slower, but we're still a little fast, and you can watch for the little lights, which would be right over about in here, and they're both white. If you see one red and one white, then we're at the right altitude, but we're a little high still, and we're going to land anyway. Okay, we're just going to land down here. Normally you aim for the numbers, but your wheels actually touch down here. See, those are white. That means that we're high. It's nice to see one white, one red. Okay, we're going to land beyond this point here. We're just losing speed. And we've got flaps all the way down, so that's helping us. There you felt the and heard the wheels touch down. So we're gonna get off of the runway here and let other planes use it, and so that ends our little this particular flight. 2 turns around the runway with the go around. Let's call it quits with this right here. Okay. Well, that was fun, and believe me, I'm delighted to be back in the air. We got a chance to get a little going. I actually remembered how to take the plane off, but I've got many things to catch up on. You know, we were getting to the point where in September I was really working on landing, and actually had one landing that the instructor called perfect. And she said she wants to see a few more of those before she lets me solo. And then I had the big problem with the GI bleed, and then broke my ankle and all of that. And in the meantime, the aircraft saw a complete redo of the fuel lines, and the pitot and the static lines all redone. We did notice that the Garmin G5 did not read the same as the old analog speedometer. So we've got some tweaking to do to get everything in the right position. We still have to do that. The compass has to be done. I've got a couple videos coming up. I was asked by William Noble to talk about the base that sits at the base of the hex beam, and that was built by Mike Bergman, a friend of mine. I'll show you how that works. And then I got another question from somebody: why do some verticals need ground plane or ground radials, and others don't? So we'll talk about that. So we've got a couple very interesting videos coming up. So if you'd like to help support this channel, and I will admit I do sometimes help pay for airplane things with this, but if you'd like to help the channel financially, you can go to dcasler.com/support. And until we next meet, 73, and see you in the air.